I think one of the things that Wayne could do to try and redeem the situation and his reputation is tell the truth. It's an area he hasn't gone to before. In the past, what he's done is he's come out with these grandiose promises, which, of course, he hasn't delivered. Last three budgets, he's told us that he'll be delivering a surplus this year. Now he says he won't. And so, as he sits down to write his budget speech, I think he could grab the attention of the country by saying, look, I mucked the whole thing up. I didn't know what I was doing. I made you false promises. But now it's time to change the script. And I'm going to tell you how we'll change the script. We'll start making promises that we intend to keep, and we'll keep them. We may not be here much longer, but,
just interrupting you. My God, they're glad that you're not there on the other side.
I tell you, he'd get the attention of the country. On budget night, I think it's May 14th, and he's going to turn on, he's going to say, I told you we're going to have a surplus, I never did it, so I'll tell you we'll have one next year. And everybody will say, oh, good on you, Wayne, yeah, we've heard all this before. Now, and I'm quite serious about this. I think if Wayne stood up and said, look, I didn't know what I was doing, and now I've learned a thing or two, and I'm going to give you the truth. I spent money I didn't have, we wasted it on the pink bats, I've learnt my lesson, so I'm not going to make a false promise to you today. I'm just going to try and be level, and I'm going to try and give it. The way this is working, Alan, I think the listeners have got to understand this. You say something's going to raise some money, and you put this little line item in your budget, and you say, see that line item? That's money. Now I'll spend it. But when you actually get to that year, that line item never actually materialises.
Correct.
But the money's been spent.
Correct.
And so you end up the year and say, oh, my goodness, how did that happen? Oh, I've spent money I didn't have. Now, this is what people think. I think, oh, well, how do you spend money you don't have? Where does it come from? I'll tell you where it comes from. You get to the end of the year, you say, I've spent $40 billion I didn't have. I'll have to borrow. It's like with your weekly wage. Mm. If you spend your weekly wage plus $100, you've got to go somewhere and borrow the $100. Correct. Right? So he gets to the end of the year and he says, oh, I spent $40 billion, I'll borrow $40 billion. So that's what he did at the end of the year. At the end of last year, he had to borrow $48 billion. At the end of the year before, he had to borrow $55 billion. At the end of the year before, he had to borrow $27 billion. So now we've got borrowings up around $170 billion in net terms. Now, he obviously hopes that after he's thrown out of office, the Liberal Party will come along and it'll pay it off again. That's his hope. I've heard Mr. Swan say, oh, well, it's all because I don't have as much revenue as Mr. Costello used to have. Now, in fact, he's got $100 billion more.
Well, just on that, Peter, I mean, in the opening question time in Parliament this year, Julia Gillard used an expression that you and I have never heard. We can't go into surplus because there'd been a write-down in revenues. I mean, have you ever heard we can write down the value of an asset, a write-down in revenues. Revenues this year will be $50 billion higher than before the global financial crisis. $50 billion. The problem's expenditure, not revenue.
Oh, the problem's expenditure. I mean, he's got $100 billion more per year.
Absolutely, per year.
Per year, and
per year.
He spends all that, and more. And here's the point. I mean, when Gillard makes that speech, Alan, she's reading off a prepared text. I don't think she really understands what she's saying. So I cut her a bit of slack. I mean, she's given this piece of paper to read out. She reads it out. I don't think she fully understands what she's saying, that she has got an extra $100 billion. But Mr. Swan, he should understand. He's been there for 5 years.
Well, he's got a department. How many in Treasury?
Well, I don't know, but thousands, right? And he's never really got on top of the figures.
No, not figures. Now, on May 2011... budget, May 2011. He told us hand on heart the deficit in 2012, June 30, with $22.6 billion. In November 2011, 6 months later, no, not 22.6, 37.1. 4 months later, March 2012, no, not 37.1, 38.4. May 2012, when he brought down the budget, whoa, $44.4 billion. By the time they got to June, it was 43.7, double what he predicted.
Yes, and when he got to June, it was 43.7.
Yeah.
Turned around to Penny Wong and he said, "Good job, Penny."
That's right. That's right, he did. Eh?
Good job, because...
So, Joe Hockey tried to table papers in the Parliament earlier this year containing 166, because this is the theme of your thing, tell the truth, 166 promises from the Prime Minister about there being a surplus, 366 promises from Wayne Swan, there'll be a surplus. No ifs or buts.
No. But you see, Alan, this is what gets me about all this, and this is why I wrote my piece. There's enough journalists that will write it. He'll come out on budget night and he'll say, I have a plan tonight, the budget will be in surplus maybe next year, maybe the year after. And journalists will write that. That'll be on the front page. Because they've been writing, by the way, for the last 3 years.
Absolutely.
This budget's in surplus.
There's no analysis,
3 years.
no objectivity, no critical.
And this is the point. He says it. And I don't think he can actually believe this. He keeps saying it. They keep writing it. He's thinking to himself, well, sooner or later they're going to wake up to this and they won't.
But how are future... You've got kids. How are future generations going to manage inheriting this debt? She's gone. She'll be gone. He's gone. They don't have to worry. They'll take their super and they're gone.
Yeah.
But what about your kids and Ross's kids and Paul's kids?
Yeah.
What's to happen?
Well, the taxes that they pay will have to go and fund the hospitals and the schools and the roads of their generation, and then they'll have to pay a bit more tax to fund Mr. Swan's spending. In other words, you understand this point, that they won't get 100% of the value of their taxes. They might be paying 105, 110%,
correct,
of which they'll get 100%
correct.
that generation. The other 5, 10, whatever it is going to go to fund Mr. Swan's.
But then she was out there, Miss Gillard was out there at the Rooty Hill, $1 billion for this, not millions, she said, billions. Gonski, 6.5, no money. National Disability, 15 billion, no money. National Broadband Network will start at 50 billion and go on, no money. And expectations keep being raised.
Exactly right. And then, of course, they're never delivered. And then, just before anybody's about to sort of wake up that it hasn't been delivered, you wake up, but, most journalists don't, right? Just before everybody's about to wake up, what you do is you make another grand promise, and they all go off, like greyhounds, chasing that rabbit down that barrow. And just as they're about to get to that barrow and find that promise hasn't been delivered, you make another one. Right? And this is the whole point. You've got to keep on making promises to distract the press lest they ever find out what happened to the last one. And this is my point. For 3 years now, he's been saying, the budget this year, where we are now, is going to be surplus. He said that back in 2010, said in 2011, said in 2012. We're about to get to the time, right, where everybody can see how worthwhile this promise was. And you know what they're going to do? Distract you with a disability scheme.
That's it. I mean, it's just lie after lie after lie. I mean, the debt ceiling was 75 billion. Then it went to 200. Then it went to 250 billion. Now 300 billion.
And you see, this is why you've got to keep the promises coming, because the promises, in fact, are the distraction. That's the whole object.
Good point.
And, it works for a while, but I just have a feeling it's starting to catch up now.
You hope so.
As I said in that column in the Daily Telegraph, we're not interested in hearing him say now when in the future he intends to balance the budget. Somebody tell us when it's happened.
You said that Peter Costello ended...
While Mr. Swan's there.
Yeah, you ended by saying there are real problems, and wouldn't it be nice if just for once the budget became a time to be honest and realistic about fixing them.